As you go on more and more cruises, you're gonna find out that there's a whole bunch of weird facts out there that you may never even heard of. But I find them interesting. I'm gonna tell you about them, and that's what's next. Some of these things are kind of common sense, but then some of these things just kind of make your mind do. Like, did you know the Queen Mary 2 by Cunard? It's actually one of the fastest cruise ships on the water. It does transatlantics, like from New York to London, and it can cruise upwards of 30 knots. 30 knots, if you didn't know, is equivalent to 1.15 miles per hour. So yeah, for all of us, that works out to be about 34.5 miles per hour. That's pretty quick for a cruise line. Most cruise lines that I've been on will be cruising at around 20 knots. Did you know that there are still pieces of the Titanic that are floating to the surface all the way to this day? And they're all super valuable artifacts that end up being bought by very rich people or museums or other things like that. And did you know that there are a lot of people nowadays, instead of going to retirement communities and retirement homes that can cost excess of $75,000 to $100,000 a year, have now chosen to go on cruises permanently where they travel the world, and in that way they can travel and have room and board and meals and everything else catered to them 24 hours a day. Would you retire to a cruise ship? Tell me below. I would. Did you know that many of the larger cruise lines now have private islands completely built and structured around their cruise travelers? These private islands are completely separated from anywhere else in the world, and yeah, it's kind of like a whole world of their own. While some are completely and absolutely owned by the company, some others are destinations at islands, and they're leased by the company from a country. You'll have to look into each individual lines to see what they offer. On some cruise ships, they actually have a ban on bananas because in some locations, bananas can be considered bad luck, superstition. No go to bananas. No, there is not lawlessness at sea. This is going to get into a couple of different weird facts. First of all, the ships, when they're within 24 miles of the coastline of a country, then they're going to abide by those laws. But once they leave that into international waters, they abide by the country in which they fly the flag. So if the ship is out of Nassau or Bahamas or Panama, they're going to abide by those laws while in international waters. While that's being said, this can lead to a lot of gray areas when it comes to criminal acts. So that brings me to the fact that, did you know that on every ship there is a brig, which is a prison in this area that is very secure, and they will have security around them 24 hours a day in case of an incident or breaking one of those maritime laws. You should know that most cruise ships are trying to be prepared for everything. So in that case, on all cruise ships, there's probably going to be a morgue that can hold a few bodies. Because first of all, a lot of elderly people travel, and then there is also incidences and bad luck. And if you got to pick a way to go, going on a cruise ship probably wouldn't be the worst way. But if it does happen, the cruise ship is prepared and can store the body until it can be properly sent back to wherever it needs to be sent to. As for ghost ships, there was the SS America Star. It was abandoned off the Canary Islands and sat out there for a long period of time. And it really did become an intriguing place for people visiting the Canary Islands or anywhere near there, or other ships and cruise lines passing. Yes, I would explore and spend the night on an abandoned cruise ship. That would be amazing. Would you want to come with me? Yes or no? Tell me. Pretty much all ships have advanced warning devices, including for icebergs. And since Titanic, they have established the International Ice Patrol, which does patrol for those things and also uses satellites to patrol the areas for icebergs to help navigation for cruise ships and other ships. I wonder what an alarm sound sounds like for iceberg detection. Jack! Poor Jack! Jack! Yeah, I still vote for Jack, guys, when it comes to the movie. He should have got on the door. Did you know that when cruise ships are actually going through ports or through harbors or anything like that, they never make left turns? It's a method called red right returning, which means they keep the red buoys to the right at all times, and that's which way they're going to turn into the ports. I ain't never seen no stop sign out there, or yield, or... If you're booking your next cruise, here's something you can look up for your cruise line and your cruise ship in particular. Every single cruise ship has a godmother. It's an age-old maritime ritual that when the new ship comes out and it's given its name and it's christened, that the godmother swings a bottle of champagne and busts it on the hull. It is normally a big celebratory thing, and there has been a few ships where the bottle didn't break, like the Costa Concordia, which then proceeded to sink off of Italy a whole bunch of years later, which was probably a bad omen from the champagne bottle that didn't break when they tried to christen it. And you can look up every one of these people's names, look up Godmothers of cruise ships, and you'll find out that a lot of impressive and people you wouldn't think of's names are on some of these ships. It's pretty interesting. Like Cunard has Queen Elizabeth, and Queen Elizabeth is actually the godmother of that ship. Oh, and speaking about icebergs and detections, there are some cruise ships that are icebreakers. Their hull is built thicker and differently than most other cruise lines, and they're meant to crack through icebergs or ice of any kind. Now, while even the biggest cruise ships only hold maybe 6,000 passengers, they can serve over 30,000 meals out of one kitchen per day. Speaking of 30,000 or something, did you know that some of the anchors on cruise ships, just one singular anchor, can weigh upwards of 20 to 30,000 pounds? Now, an area of the ship you may never get to see, but it is there, and it is basically the heart of the ship, where everything moves from your bags to the food being loaded onto the ship or trash offloaded later. Everything travels down something called I-95, which is the main corridor that goes pretty much from the back all the way to the front of the ship, where passengers are normally never allowed. Did you know that the floor 13 is missing from some cruise ships? But did you also know that some cruise ships do have 13 but do not have 17? Because in their culture, 17 is more unlucky than 13. So the next time you're on a ship, check for which floor might be missing. You do need to know that there's something called a repositioning tour, and this is actually normally takes place twice a year when the seasons are changing, where a ship needs to go from, say, Alaska area down to the Caribbean in Miami. But because it is complex and difficult for some, it makes it cheaper for you. So that would be a great way to find a cheaper cruise. But we're gonna talk about that fully in another video just dedicated to repositioning tours. That's coming up soon, but you're gonna have to subscribe and then find out what's next.